So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks to the organizers for including the paper and also getting us all here in person as a young academic. This is, it's great to be back. This is joint work with Coach John and Fahad Saleh, who's in the audience. And this is a paper that studies the economics of blockchain governance. So I know some of you might not have as strong a blockchain background. So just give you a very high level idea, a blockchain is just a ledger that records cryptocurrency transactions. So Bitcoin is a ledger that's just going to record Bitcoin transactions from one account to another. So when I say we're studying governance, blockchain governance in this paper, we're studying the real innovation that blockchain creates, which is sort of designing a system of rules that allows us to maintain and update the blockchain ledger in a decentralized and distributed fashion. So typically these rules are commonly referred to as consensus protocols. And in this paper, we're going to focus on two of the most prominently used consensus protocols in practice. So that they're called proof of work is one and proof of stake is the other. Later in the talk, I'll explain the differences and how they work. But for now, you should just know that proof of work was the original consensus protocol. This is the protocol that governs Bitcoin and Ethereum, the two largest blockchains, along with many others. Proof of stake, on the other hand, I like to think of as an up-and-coming competitor. And this is best evidenced by the fact that Ethereum is currently building the infrastructure to switch from a proof of work to a proof of stake blockchain. Aside from Ethereum, there's also some popular blockchains like Cardano and Solana, which were proof of stake from inception. So in general, these two consensus protocols allow the blockchain to achieve consensus to ensure that there's only one true history of the blockchain ledger at any point in time. But the fact that we see multiple ways to achieve this consensus leads to a natural question, which is, are there certain blockchain characteristics that are specific to blockchains governed by either, let's say, a proof of work blockchain or a proof of stake blockchain? Now, the characteristic that we're most interested in is scalability. So what we want to know is, what are the economic implications of scaling blockchains? And does it matter whether the blockchain is proof of work or proof of stake? When I talk about scaling, I'm talking about increasing the rate at which transactions get added to the blockchain ledger. This can be done either by increasing the frequency with which blocks of transactions are added, or by increasing the size of the blocks. As you can imagine, scaling is an important feature for practitioners and users alike, right? The faster your transactions clear, the more useful the underlying cryptocurrency will be. And this is evidenced by this article here, which highlights the ridiculously high cost of gas on Ethereum and the fact that this is making the blockchain unusable for average and small size transactions. So what does it mean by the high cost of gas? Well, when you want your transaction to be added to the blockchain, you can attach a fee to that transaction. And the validators which add these transactions to the blockchain, they're basically going to select the transactions with the highest fees because they get to keep the fee as revenue. So what happens with Ethereum is that at times, the blockchain becomes so congested that it becomes basically the fees that you have to attach to your transaction in order to get it added with any sort of speed will be too high, so high that it would actually outweigh the underlying value of the transaction, especially for smaller to middle-sized transactions. So what does this have to do with scaling? Well, the idea would be if we scale the blockchain, we're going to reduce that congestion naturally. And this is going to sort of solve this problem, making the blockchain more viable for smaller size transactions. And this leads in general to a lay intuition, which is that faster processing of transactions on the blockchain is always going to enhance user utility and adoption of the blockchain. And so the main point of this paper is to show that this lay intuition need not be correct once we account for certain security implications of scaling. And there's going to be a differential effect depending on whether the blockchain is governed by proof of work or by proof of stake. So just to highlight the main result, we're showing in this paper that for a proof of work blockchain, scaling beyond a certain point is going to render the blockchain obsolete, generating zero adoption and zero utility. So scaling can be very bad for a proof of work blockchain. In contrast, for proof of stake, scaling is always going to enhance user utility and possibly more so than you might have expected prior to seeing this paper. So what I would like to do now is give you a preview of the model, and then I'll explain the differences with proof of work and proof of stake and try to give you this intuition behind these main results that scaling is bad for proof of work, but is good for proof of stake. So we're modeling the blockchain as a payment system. We're going to have overlapping generations of users. Young users are going to arrive. They're going to choose to possibly purchase the cryptocurrency. They're going to purchase it from old users. Basically, you arrive with some endowment. You only want to consume that endowment when you're old. So you're going to use the cryptocurrency as a store of value. Now, the young users have this option, which is to, instead of buying the cryptocurrency, they can instead use a sort of imperfect outside option. So what's going to happen with this outside option is you're going to convert 1 unit of endowment when you're young to sigma units of endowment less than 1 when you're older. So this is a costly technology. You can think of it as holding inflationary fiat. On the other hand, if the user decides to purchase the cryptocurrency, well, this is going to turn 1 unit of endowment when you're young into some amount of endowment when you're older to consume, and this is going to be the equilibrium sort of payoff from holding the cryptocurrency. So I'd just like to explain a little bit what goes into this payoff to give you a better idea of what's happening in the model. So within the parentheses, this first term e to the minus rho, that's going to be the gross return from the cryptocurrency. So basically, cryptocurrency supply is constantly growing at a rate rho. This is what we see in practice. I'll talk a little bit about this at the end of the talk. So the cryptocurrency is already going to be inflationary, so your gross return is already going to be less than 1. But then there's some other terms that you're going to have to net out. So what we have here is sort of the effect of congestion pricing. So as I mentioned earlier, you can attach a fee to your transaction to have it added to the blockchain with a higher speed. And in this model, so basically what you're going to have as your payoff is when you get older, you're trying to liquidate your cryptocurrency. It's going to take some time for that cryptocurrency to be liquidated. That time is going to be WI. Each user is going to have a disutility from waiting, CI, and we're going to allow users to have different disutilities. So you're going to have some very impatient users with a high cost of waiting and some very patient users with a low cost of waiting. Now, each of these users can decide individually to pay a fee in order to speed up the time with which the transaction gets added and lower the expected wait time. So the impatient users will naturally in equilibrium offer high fees and wait less, whereas the patient users will offer low fees and wait a longer time. Okay, so now the only last piece of the puzzle is sort of what do the validators and the consensus protocol, what role do they play? So the validators, again, they're going to add these transactions to the blockchain. In exchange, they're going to receive these fees. That's going to constitute a large part of their revenues for helping to maintain the blockchain. And in exchange, these validators are going to provide some sort of security. So security here is going to be the last term, which represents the probability that the blockchain doesn't have any disruption from the time you're young and purchase the cryptocurrency to the time that you liquidate. It's a probability because the way we model attacking a blockchain is basically going to be an attacker is going to draw random benefit from successfully attacking the blockchain. And then they're going to attack if and only if the benefit is higher than the cost. And what we do in this paper is we show what exactly is the cost of attacking the blockchain and sort of disrupting the service, denying any sort of transactions being added in the future. A crucial point of the paper is that that cost of attacking the blockchain is going to depend critically on the consensus protocol. All right, so that's a brief overview of the model. Now we can go to the proof of work case, and I'll explain why scaling is bad for proof of work in the context of the model, and then we'll switch to proof of stake after. So the way that proof of work functions is that the proof of work protocol is going to allocate control to update the next block in the blockchain according to a computational contest. This contest is called mining. Basically, the only way to have a higher chance to win this contest is to exert more energy trying to solve it, okay? So in that sense, control to update the next block is going to be conferred into the according to the amount of computational expenditure that you exert trying to solve this puzzle. If I exert more computational power trying to solve it than one of you, I will always have a higher likelihood of solving it before you. Now, the attacker wants to hijack basically the block creation process so that they can deny service to any of the users, so no more meaningful transactions will be added after that point. And so from the attacker's perspective in a proof of work blockchain, successfully attacking it is going to require exerting some fraction of the total computational expenditure. Now, this mining is competitive. There's free entry to mining. So in equilibrium, we're going to expect that the total mining expenditure is going to be equal to mining revenues. And in that case, the proof of work security is going to depend critically on the endogenous mining revenue from the blockchain. So here I can sort of now highlight this result that scaling is bad for proof of work blockchains. So the thought experiment here is let's increase the scale of the blockchain. The first effect is that for all users, it's going to lower the expected amount of time that you wait to have your transaction added. So this will be a good thing at first sight. Then these users, naturally, because they wait less, they're going to pay lower fees in equilibrium. This is like saying the willingness to pay to cut the line is decreasing in the size of the line. Now, at this point, all the users are paying lower fees because of the higher scale, but this is going to lead to lower mining revenue. And as I said on the previous slide, mining revenue is directly linked to the security of the blockchain because it's directly linked to the blockchain's hash rate. So for a proof of work blockchain, when you increase scale, you're going to lower security because the equilibrium hash rate is going to decrease. Now, from the user's perspective, it's not clear. There's sort of a trade-off here. I pay lower fees, I wait less time, but there's a higher chance that the blockchain gets sort of attacked before I get to liquidate. So in that case, what we can say is that when the scale is sufficiently high, the security effect is going to outweigh the lower fees and wait times. So for sufficiently high scale, the demand for the cryptocurrency is going to decrease. And this is going to have a feedback effect into the mining revenues and the security until we sort of hit an equilibrium. So that's the idea as to why scaling can be bad for proof of work blockchains. Now I can switch gears and start talking about proof of stake. So proof of stake is just an entirely different way to update the blockchain. And the way that it works is it's going to confer control to update the next block according to a lottery called staking. So basically anyone holding the cryptocurrency can stake that cryptocurrency. And at pre-specified intervals, the protocol is going to select 1 unit of cryptocurrency from the total set of staked cryptocurrency. The selection is uniformly at random. And then the owner of that cryptocurrency gets allocated the right to update the next block in the blockchain. So in general, that's how staking works. And what this means is that control of the blockchain is going to be conferred in proportion to the number of cryptocurrency units you stake. Again, if I stake more cryptocurrency units than one of you, I will have a higher likelihood of winning this lottery and being allocated the right to update the next block in the blockchain. Okay, from the attacker's perspective, this means that successfully attacking the blockchain is going to require owning and staking a certain fraction of the cryptocurrency. Okay, this means that the cost of controlling the blockchain is no longer going to be proportional to mining revenues, like in the proof of work case. Instead, it's going to be proportional to the cryptocurrency's market value. So a higher cryptocurrency market value is going to increase the cost of attacking the blockchain. And that means proof of stake security is going to depend on the cryptocurrency's market value. What we show then is that higher scale is going to increase the market value of the cryptocurrency. And this is going to feed back into security, basically making, satisfying our lay intuition that higher scale is just going to make everything better off and increase adoption of the cryptocurrency. So again, we can go through the same thought experiment. So here we're increasing the scale of a proof of stake blockchain now. When I increase the scale, I decrease the expected wait times. This decreases the fees paid in equilibrium and the validator revenues, just like before in the proof of work case. It's just that now there's no immediate effect from the decreased validator revenue on security. right? We need to understand how is this going to map to the market value of the cryptocurrency. There's not this direct link between revenues and security, like in the proof of work case. So now at this point, the users are going to say, well, hey, we're paying lower fees, we're waiting less time. So in general, that's going to increase the value of investing in the cryptocurrency. It's going to make it more attractive. So more users are going to adopt instead of using the outside option. This is going to increase the demand. And of course, once you increase the demand, you increase the price and the market value of the cryptocurrency. So this is going to feed back into security and increase the security of the blockchain. Okay, so scaling now for a proof of stake blockchain is always going to increase the sort of payout you get for it. That's going to increase adoption, and that's going to feed back to increased security. And this is why scaling is a good thing for proof of stake blockchains. So a useful analogy at this point for the proof of stake case would be to think of a proof of stake blockchain as structured like an all equity firm. And so from the proof of stake side, this is the proof of stake cryptocurrency holdings would be like voting shares in this all equity firm. And then an attack on a proof of stake blockchain is going to be akin to a hostile takeover of the all equity firm. So what do I mean by this? Well, when the firm is well run, the market value of the shares you need to initiate this hostile takeover is going to be prohibitively high, and that's going to make the takeover very much unlikely. Similarly, with the proof of stake blockchain, when the scale of the blockchain is high, the market value of the cryptocurrency is high. This is going to make it prohibitively costly to initiate a successful attack, and that's going to make attacks much less likely. Okay, there's one thing I haven't talked about so far, which is block rewards. So I'm talking about, in the proof of work case, the fact that lower fees, lower mining revenues, and this lowers security of the proof of work blockchain. But some of you might realize that, well, that fees do not constitute the only revenue to miners. There's also these things called block rewards. So when you're allocated the right to update a block, you're not only earning the fees, but you're also going to earn the block reward, which is some amount of cryptocurrency. And this cryptocurrency is going to be newly issued cryptocurrency. So this is sort of the guaranteed reward that you get. So this brings up a natural question. If I increase scale and this decreases fee revenue, well, why not just increase block rewards to offset that? And then you could, in principle, maintain the same level of security. So we show that this is not going to be enough to solve this problem, especially for a sufficiently high scale. And the reason for this goes back to this cryptocurrency growth rate and the inflation of the cryptocurrency. So basically, increasing block rewards is like increasing rho. So while for low scale, we could possibly offset the decreased fee revenues by increasing block rewards, the problem is that eventually the gross payoff, not even accounting for fees and wait time and security, will just be less than the outside option because the cryptocurrency will become too inflationary. Okay, so this is why block rewards can't solve this problem for a high scale for a proof of work blockchain. Okay. So basically, again, just to reiterate, right, there's going to be an upper bound on the block reward that you can set while still maintaining a positive level of adoption. If you set block rewards too high, basically all users will utilize the outside option because the cryptocurrency becomes too inflationary. Now, for the proof of stake case, we show that this effect actually doesn't exist. So for proof of stake, the idea is that the block rewards are going to be paid back to the users. And unlike in proof of work, the users don't have to spend any sort of wasteful energy to perform, to compete in this computational puzzle. So for proof of stake, the block rewards are paid back to the users, and in expectation, when users are homogeneous, they're gonna pay an inflationary cost, and they're gonna receive it back in the rewards as they stake before they liquidate. Now, this is a sort of simple model of staking incentives. So this motivated us to start working on a new project where we look at investors with different trading horizons and how block rewards affect their staking incentives. We come up with some more nuanced relationship between staking incentives and block rewards. So if you're interested in that, this is the paper. You can find it on our websites. At the same time, keeping the block rewards fixed, all of our results here would go through in that more nuanced model of staking incentives. Okay. So I don't really know how much time I have, but let me just quickly conclude. So what we're showing in this paper is that for proof of work blockchains, scale and security compete with each other, requiring some inefficiency. In particular, scaling the most famous proof of work blockchain, Bitcoin, beyond a certain point will become self-defeating, generating zero adoption and zero utility because it would just become too insecure. In contrast, for proof of stake blockchain, scale is going to enhance security. It's going to allow us to avoid this inefficiency. And we think this strongly promotes the use of proof of stake blockchains for, like Ethereum 2.0, for DeFi activities that require speed. Okay, so you can imagine some of these DeFi activities, it's going to be very important to have high speed of transactions for things like arbitrage. And we think that proof of stake is going to be better suited to meet those requirements. Thank you.
That seems to be working well enough. Okay, thank you so much for inviting me to discuss this really interesting paper.
Oh yeah, it doesn't work. I was just using the keyboard.
Oh, no. Okay. So the paper's question is, which consensus protocol, proof of work or proof of stake, allows for the creation of a secure and scalable, where kind of the key idea with the blockchain being scalable is that it allows the processing of transactions quickly. So which of these two consensus protocols allows for the creation of a secure and scalable blockchain? Now, I think this is a really important question. I think it's a very timely question. And I'm going to sort of offer two reasons why I think that sort of alternative motivations for why I think this is a really important question. So security and scalability are of first order importance for the value of blockchain. Both these issues, I think, have arguably led to the slow adoption of blockchain in everyday life. So proof of work is currently the majority of crypto market cap, and it has scalability and security problems in practice. So the Bitcoin transaction rate, even at its quickest, still takes about 10 minutes, making it very difficult to use as an actual currency for everyday life. And attacks attempting to create malicious forks are not uncommon in the blockchain, which lead to instability in the value of cryptocurrency. So I think another way to think about insights that this paper is generating are these problems fundamental to proof of work? We've seen these problems in blockchain, and is it something about proof of work that's causing these problems, which is the majority of what we've seen so far? Can proof of stake do better? Can it allow us to use blockchain without having these problems? I think another important side of this, which is currently being talked about a lot, is the environmental value, which the paper can help contribute to. Proof of stake has a significantly lower environmental footprint than proof of work. Ethereum is planning to migrate to proof of stake, and it estimates a reduction in environmental impact from this migration of 99%. So there's obviously value to migrating to proof of stake rather than proof of work. So another way this paper is really important is it helps us think through, well, okay, there's obvious value to migrating to proof of stake, but is it actually scalable and will it be secure? And the paper has a really clear insight. Proof of stake is scalable and secure, and in fact, proof of work is not. So I really like this paper. I think it's asking a really important and timely question, and it's generating a clear insight, which for the most part, I was quite convinced by. There are some potential areas for improvement, I think, which is what my comments will center around. Some key parameters, I think are right now, they're exogenous, and it would be nice to see them endogenized. And then related to that first comment, it would be the paper has really clear, like really stark empirical predictions for what we should see under proof of work versus a proof of stake protocol. And it would be nice to connect that a little bit more to what we actually observe in practice. So before talking about my comments, I just want to talk through the basic mechanism a little bit. Thomas did a great job presenting it, but I'll just talk you through it. So there's this lambda, which is the transaction rate on the blockchain, and this is exogenous in the paper. So 1 over lambda is the service time per user. So as lambda increases, the transaction rate on the blockchain is increasing, and users have to wait for less time to have their transactions processed. So achieving scale in this model essentially means increasing lambda, because that's lowering the transaction rate. And so once this lambda increases, it's going to reduce the delay in transaction processing. It's going to increase the transaction rate. That's going to lead to users paying less fees in equilibrium to improve their position in line, because the transaction processing time is faster. So I don't want to pay as much to avoid a delay. And conditional on security, on the blockchain being secure, we can see that that's going to make the cryptocurrency a more attractive investment for these users, right? So they have to wait. They suffer because they're waiting to have their transactions processed. So now they're waiting for less time, and they have to pay less fees. So you're going to see more adoption, and that's going to increase the market capitalization of coins. So this increase in the transaction rate is going to lead to less fees being paid in equilibrium. Now let's think about these two different protocols. So in the case of proof of work, that's going to lead to less miners entering the market. Fees are the way that they're compensated. Fees are the way that they make money from mining. So less miners are going to enter the market because the benefit from mining is decreasing. Now, in the case of proof of stake, the lower fees in the model, it's going to lead to no change in stakers. So the overlapping generation framework is set up so that if you are born in generation T and you buy cryptocurrency in generation T, you're not going to need to use it until time T plus 2. So at time T plus 1, you essentially have no liquidity needs, and everyone is happy to stake. Right? So everyone who purchased coins from the previous generation is going to stake regardless of their expected fee revenue, because they have no liquidity needs. And so there's really no cost for them to stake in that interim period. And that's their by assumption in the model. So the other thing that's going to happen when the transaction rate is increasing is going to increase the market value of the cryptocurrency, of course, conditional on security. So what's going to happen in the case of proof of work, there's no direct effect of this market cap on the cost for miners or attackers. It's just about, there could be indirect effects depending on how it affects the entry for miners, but there's no direct effect of market capitalization on the cost for mining. In the case of proof of stake, there's not going to be any effect in the model of an increase in the market value of the cryptocurrency on the cost for stakers, because everyone at time T who's purchased cryptocurrency in the previous period doesn't have liquidity needs. They're just going to stake their cryptocurrency, but it is going to affect the cost of the attacker, of a potential attacker. That's going to be increasing in the market value of the cryptocurrency. So if we think about an attacker is going to get an exogenous benefit B from attacking. And now if in the case of proof of work, the cost of attacking is going to decrease with scale because we have less miners, right? That's coming from the fee channel. So an increase in the transaction rate is leading to less fees. That's leading to less miners. That's going to cause an increase in the cost of attacking in the case of proof of work. But with proof of stake, there's no change in the number of stakers. So that effect isn't really there. And it's going to increase with scale because you have the same number of stakers, but the blockchain has larger market caps. You need to spend, the attacker is going to have to spend more money to actually be able to mount an attack that's high enough, that's large enough. Okay, so my first comment is to think about endogenizing a few parameters that I think are key to the mechanism. So in particular, it's the transaction rate, the benefit from attacking are both currently exogenous, and there's this assumption that validators are able to costlessly stake in the case of proof of stake because they have no liquidity needs in that interim period. I think these are all key to the analysis and arguably might be affected by the scale of the blockchain. So they're all going to affect both security and scale. So I'll talk about each of them one by one. So let's think about the transaction rate first. So the transaction rate, I think in practice, it should depend on the equilibrium number of validators. It's hard to think about how you're going to have a high transaction rate on a blockchain without having people who are actually validating those transactions. So in the proof of work analysis, because the transaction rate is exogenous and we're thinking about increasing scale as increasing this transaction rate, you're going to get this in the model. A high transaction rate results in low fees, and that results in really low miner entry. But for me, it was difficult to think about, like simultaneously think about a high transaction rate and less miners, because how do you get to that high transaction rate? It might be nice to endogenize the transaction rate. And I think endogenizing it might give you a nice result where in the case of proof of work, there might just be a natural limit to scale. So if you endogenize the transaction rate, you will still have the essential effect, the channels that you're talking about. So you're still going to have a case where as the transaction rate increases, fee revenue is going to decline, and that's going to reduce the number of miners that want to enter, but it may not lead to a complete breakdown of the blockchain, and you might just get an endogenous limit to scale for proof of work, but that wouldn't be the case for proof of stake. So I think the key insight is going to survive, but it might end up being a little more nuanced. The benefit from attacking is also exogenous. And I think that this would arguably also depend on scale and consequently the market value of the cryptocurrency. So if one of the reasons benefits from attacking is that you're able to double spend, that benefit should increase as the coins become more valuable. It would be nice to show the robustness of the mechanism to having an endogenous benefit from attacking. And then the last thing is this assumption that because of the way the model is set up at time t, previous generation, so generation t-1 is not going to have any liquidity needs. And so everyone is just going to stake any crypto that they have. So there's no cost in proof of stake for kind of actual like non-malicious validators to be staking in the model because of this. I think in practice, staking is probably costly and arguably could become more costly as there's an increase in the market value of the coin. So if you have a greater amount of wealth that's illiquid for a certain period, think that you might have liquidity needs, or for a certain time, that's going to be costlier. And then this issue would kind of work against the forces in the model, because if you have costlier validation with scale, so if market value increases with scale and that leads to costlier validation, you're going to have less validators in proof of stake. That might make it easier to attack. And you're not going to have that channel with proof of work because market cap is not going to affect proof of work as directly. And you might get this, I was trying to think through it, and I think that it might be non-monotonic in scale because once transactions are very fast, there's also just less cost for stakers because their coins are tied up for a lower period of time and are more liquid. So I think the mean result is still going to be preserved, but it would be nice to see this endogenized. And so the just last comment I had, which is related to my first comment, is connecting the empirical predictions more to what we observe in practice. So paper has really stark empirical predictions. Proof of stake is scalable and secure. Proof of work is not scalable and secure. And generally, the proof of work should get less secure as scale increases. Now, in practice, while proof of work does seem to have scalability and security issues, I wasn't sure if there was evidence showing that as the scale has increased, security has decreased, and it does seem to be one of the paper's predictions. This is also where I think endogenizing the transaction rate might help because you get a more nuanced prediction about the maximum scale we might see, and it might actually be really nice to be able to explain why we haven't seen a further increase in the a further decrease in processing times, in transaction times when it comes to Bitcoin. So that would be actually a really nice result that I think the model can generate if you just endogenize the transaction rate. Okay, so that's really all I have. I think it's a really interesting paper. I would advise everyone to go read it. I think it's also really important and topical. Yeah, my suggestions are to just endogenize a few things and connect the empirical predictions, which are really stark, a little more closely to what we observe in practice.